So yes, as I said, closer than humanly possible, surrendering to the storm. This is going to be based off of the book of Jonah. I'm pretty sure everyone here is familiar with that. So imagine you were on the highway, coming home with the GPS on. Everything looks smooth and right on schedule. Now, you know your way home by memory, but keep the GPS on just in case some confusion or conflict arises. Well, on this particular day, everything that can go wrong does, just like that. And you hit a wall of traffic. I'm talking about bumper to bumper, rush hour with 3 accidents on the road type of traffic. Man, you just had a long testing day, and all you're trying to do is get home. Well, while engulfed in this traffic, feeling as though there is no way out, the GPS gives you an alternative route. At this point in time, your commute has grown from 30 minutes to an hour 30 since you hit this traffic. But with this new route, you will get about 30 minutes of your time back. So it will probably be closer to an hour. Because of this, you were even more conflicted than you were once you hit this conflict, once you hit this traffic. You were not used to listening to the GPS without being able to see the route on the screen. But with all of this traffic, you barely have the time to look down at your phone out of fear that you would crash. So instead of listening to the GPS, because you did not have the ability in this scenario to see exactly how this route would save time, to see exactly how you would get there, you just stick to the route that you were used to. This causes your ride home to actually go from an hour 30 to 3 hours. So we're talking about a ride that would normally take 30 minutes. Now it took you 3 hours, all because you were not accustomed to having the skill of listening to the GPS give you direction. You were only good at using the GPS when you can see where it is taking you. Now, think about our relationships with God. When we do not practice our obedience to God in relation to our faith, but only listen when we feel as though it is suitable to where we are going or where we can see that we are going, that is literally the same thing as the scenario I just explained. Just as obedience is a skill, faith is a skill. And in fact, these two skills are dependent on each other. You cannot exercise true obedience to the living God without exercising true faith, and vice versa. So, how do we put ourselves in the position to listen to the GPS without seeing where it is taking us? Well, I'll start off with this. There are multiple outcomes when you are in this situation. You can, one, keep on trying to do it your way, and God will take you the longest route possible to your destination, or He will make it so that you never reach a destination at all. Or finally, you can practice the skill of listening to the GPS. You can practice the skill of learning to love hearing that voice more than you love to see where it is taking you. That, church, is faith and obedience. And you have to practice these skills every single day. Ask God to open your ears to hear his voice. Ask him to open your eyes to see his vision. Ask him to open your heart to receive his, which is Jesus. There are plenty of stories in the word in which servants took God's instructions and didn't think twice about it. And what happened? They were given their ultimate purpose. There are plenty of stories where people ignored God's instruction and it ultimately led to their own destruction. And there are also stories where servants ignored his instructions and the road they took still ended them right where God had intended from the start. Today, we're going to be reading from the book of Jonah. I like especially for this topic because it relates directly to the last of these that I just mentioned. Jonah literally went the opposite direction than God wanted. But what makes this story so crazy is not that he was swallowed by a fish for 3 days and spit back out into the world, but because he knew that it was God himself telling Jonah how to move, and he still did it his own way, which was the opposite of how God told him. And even through blatant disobedience, God still had Jonah on his path the entire time. Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against this people, because I have seen how wicked its people are. But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket and went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. See, it is important to understand the geography of all of this, right? Jonah was from northern Israel. God said, Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh. Nineveh would be located somewhere around modern day Iraq, which is pretty close to Israel. But instead, Jonah said, nah, I'm going to Tarshish, which is located somewhere near modern day Spain. So instead of going east, right, not even that far east, Jonah decided to go west, like all the way west, all the way across the Mediterranean Sea west. Those were the lengths he was willing to take to run away from God. But as we talk about all of the time, that call is not one that you can just pick up the phone and decline. It doesn't work like that. Verses 4-6. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. But all this time, Jonah was sound asleep down in the hold. So the captain went down after him. How can you sleep at a time like this? He shouted. Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives. As we have established, sometimes that phone is not just going to keep getting declined by you. At some point, God is just going to drop that phone on your head. You guys ever seen like Looney Tunes or Kendra when they drop the anvil on their head and they get that big knot? You can ignore that ring, but you can't ignore that concussion. You can't ignore that ringing feeling of your head. But the craziest thing about this verse isn't that Jonah ignored God. It's that Jonah was asleep. In this verse, Jonah was asleep. He was asleep. Whole world crumbling around him, and he was sleeping. I know somebody in here today can remember a time where the world was burning around them, but they felt too tired to move. The world was burning around them, but they felt the storm too fierce. They felt too tired to even batten down the hatches and prepare for the storm. This happens sometimes when we grow immune to the storm. We're so used to storms coming that at this point, we don't even try and prepare for it. And after this happened, it was these same men that Jonah didn't even know. Those were the people that woke up Jonah. Those were the ones who finally brought him to the realizations of what was really going on. That is the same way that God will use unexpected circumstances to really wake you up, to really open your eyes to what is really going on and how you should move from there. Because Jonah had what? Grown immune to God. He had grown immune to the storm. Verse 7-12. Then the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. Casting lots is the same thing as basically drawing a straw. If you draw the short straw, then it's on you. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. Jonah drew the short straw. Why has this awful storm come down on us? They demanded. Who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality? Jonah answered, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. The sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them he was running away from the Lord. Oh, why did you do it? They groaned. And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, what should we do to stop this storm? Throw me into the sea, Jonah said, and it will become calm again. I know that this terrible storm is all my fault. And when Jonah's eyes were opened, he said, throw me into the sea. I love this part because when it comes to us, we who wrestle with God, with the trials and the tests we all face, the key to passing them, all of them, is understanding that all you have to do is get in good with the teacher, aka the person that made the test. See, right? There was a storm on an open sea, meaning the source of the storm was the water beneath it. Don't miss this. Jonah knew that he needed to surrender to the storm in order for it to stop. So he had to be given to the source of the storm. In this situation, the source of the storm was the sea. Throw me into the sea. Give me to the sea. All storms start and stop with God. But when you are on his path, no matter how hard it may be to see with your human eyes, the storm is entirely for your benefit. So, if we know that all of these storms start and stop with God, then running from these storms or trying to change the outcomes of them is literally the same thing as trying to run from God or change the outcome of his will. I feel like I need to explain storms a bit further. Let's look at a conversation between God and Satan in Job. Job 8 through 12. Job 1, 8 through 12. Then the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. Satan replied to the Lord, yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. All right, you may test him, the Lord said to Satan. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. So Satan left the Lord's presence. Satan had to ask God permission to test Job, permission to tempt Job, meaning he knew that in order to wreak havoc on Job's life, God had to give him the say-so because Job was God's. He was God's property. He was on God's path under God's protection. I mean, Job was at the pinnacle of his life. He was not living good. He was living great. He was the wealthiest man in all the land. Family was happy and healthy and large. He was living the right way. He was still putting God first no matter what success he had attained. And then God said, here, the biggest test of your life. But see, sometimes God will throw in a test just to show you that you may be there, but you aren't there yet. There is still plenty of room to level up. Job thought, or he could have thought that he peaked in life. He could have thought it can't get much better than this. But see, when you are with God, all things go through God. And when you are on his path at his pace, these things will sometimes break you down, but ultimately he will always build you up in the end. I hope somebody in here can look back at a time in their life when Satan attacked you, but you lived, only to come back stronger. A time when you were out here, and I mean out here, but you were still under God's protection, whether you knew it or not. When things were bad, but they didn't kill you, they didn't destroy you. Job was put in the belly of the beast. Jonah was put in the belly of the beast. Their paths to get there may have been different, but at the end of the day, in order to turn you into a beast, God has to put you in the belly of the beast. Yes, you are being tested. If God's favor shines upon you to win, then the devil's favor will follow to try and make you lose. Church, in this next season, you might be entering a level of testing unlike anything you have ever seen. But I'm here to tell you that God has been bragging on you. God has been smiling upon your success. Do not surrender. Do not waver. Do not let up. This is your season to become a beast. Do not run from the storm. Fall in love with the storm. Become the storm. But how is God going to make you into a force as strong and as powerful as a storm when you are afraid of getting wet? When you are afraid of the water? That is literally the story of Jonah. God said, look, Jonah, I need you to bless these people with my rain, with my blessings, with my grace. But Jonah was afraid of getting wet because of how it could have possibly affected him. I'm a human. I'm not supposed to be getting wet. That's your job. That's literally what he was saying to God. So God said, Since you're afraid of a little water, you know what? I'm going to put you at the bottom of the ocean. Therefore, no level of water will ever be able to phase you again. Once we beat that level 1 of temptation, God will allow the next wave to come because he needs you to be stronger than that one too. This life, this life, this life will never get easier, but we will continue to get stronger every day. We will continue to be renewed every day. When we get tired, ask God for rest. He will give you rest. And then it's right back in that ring. 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 17. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Yes, God. This is one of my favorite verses. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly our heart is a ticking time bomb. From a biological standpoint, each day that we live, we lose life. But each day that we surrender our lives to Christ, to God, we are given a new life each day. Each day we are given a new life, but like I say, it's a day by day process. You can't just give your life to God on Monday and then not come back and talk to him again until Saturday. Because now all these attacks that you may face from Monday through Saturday, you're not going to be handling them in the way that you are supposed to because you don't have God in your ear every single step. You could see what God wanted on Monday. You could see that GPS on Monday. But Tuesday, when he says pray, you couldn't feel it as much. You hearing a little whisper. You ignored it. Wednesday, it felt like that voice was even more faint. But that's because you weren't getting used to listening to that voice every single day. You have to ask God for strength every single day. You have to ask God for these things every day. Discernment. What you really need to see, you need to ask God every day. Some days you're going to be able to see on your own, or it will feel like it's on your own. It'll be easier to see. Some days it won't. This for light and our momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. That true sight that God gives you is the understanding that your name is being written in heaven. So the things of this planet, they're nothing. These problems that may touch you, they're nothing. On the grand scheme, they are nothing. But as humans, it's going to feel like something. That's the truth. Tuesday, at the end of Tuesday, you might have been like, what did I just experience? But Wednesday morning, you have to come back. Because if you don't, these attacks, you're going to feel them more and more. You're going to be in your flesh more and more. You're going to be struggling more and more. Because you aren't asking God to carry that weight. You have to understand, God carries the majority of the weight. But when you don't understand that weight is going to feel like way more on you because you aren't understanding who's really carrying it. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. While that is true, understanding that God is still the one holding that crown on your head is the most important thing. Because when you forget that weight will literally crush you. It's supposed to feel heavy. But when you forget that God is holding, he's going to let go and it's going to crush you. This series is called Closer Than Humanly Possible because we have to reach a point where we say to ourselves, I am not going to continue to let these human problems, these human trials stop me on my path toward my heavenly God. I am not going to let these temporary problems, these fleshly feelings get in the way of my purpose and my service to the eternal God that I serve. Just as these problems are very much alive, my God is very much alive. My God is a living God. My God is an understanding God. My God is a suffering God. He understands where I am at every single step. So why are we not listening to this great GPS? We got to turn that radio down. Because one thing about this GPS, its volume will be its volume. Sometimes you may feel the bass throughout the whole car, and sometimes the volume will feel like a whisper. But see, that is why it's also important to have the right people in that car with you. It is so important to have the right people riding with you on this path. Because if you are trying to hear that GPS and the people in that car don't care about that GPS and are talking about everything but that GPS, you will never really be able to focus on that GPS like you should. But if you have people in that car that are trying to work on hearing that GPS just as much as you are, then your navigation will help strengthen theirs, and their navigation will help strengthen yours. Everybody, bow your heads and close your eyes. Most gracious and heavenly, eternal Father, we thank you. We thank you. We thank you. You woke us up. You gave us another chance to get it right today. So thank you. You've given us the knowledge that you are real and you are living and you are breathing. So thank you. Thank you for allowing us to understand who makes the test. If I know who makes the test, I literally cannot fail. Thank you for bringing us these storms. I pray this moment moving forward, each and every servant that hears this will thank you in the midst of the storm. Because sometimes when we get tired, all we need is that thankfulness to keep us moving forward. That understanding that this is only going to make us better in the end, Father. Thank you for bringing us the storms. Sometimes the storm might bring a level of pain that we have never experienced. But with that, out of that will come a level of strength that we didn't even know that we could have. As we go into this next week, Father, I pray that whatever storms we may face, that we face them head on. We don't wait for the storm to come to us. We go out to meet it, Father. Allow us the strength to be the storm, to be a force to be reckoned with, a force that people feel when we walk in the room because it is you that is shining through us. As we go into this week, we understand that we are moving up, and with that, the test will come. But I pray that you just continue to keep us covered and protected. We love you, and we thank you, and we praise you for everything, Father. In the name of Jesus, in the name of the Holy Spirit, I pray. Amen.